24 to order at 6:31 p.m. We have one remote member, Joan Frank, and currently we're missing Jen Primack and Matt Spencer. Just want to remind the audience that at any time your audio or video may be recorded. So at this time, I will entertain any audience sharing, any public comment. All right, not hearing any public comment, we will move on to action on minutes. I'm looking for action on the open meeting minutes of November 20th, 2024.
Move that we approve those minutes.
Moved by Paul, second by John. Any discussion? All right, hearing no discussion, we will take a roll call vote. Kathleen Howland?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I myself am a yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we'll be moving on to educational policy, and I would request that we condense the approval of these three trips into a single vote.
So in your packet are three overnight field trip applications. These are standard field trips that our students go on, and Sean can provide a little bit of overview for each.
Sure, yeah, so each of the three represent a field trip application for a field trip we've done in previous years. So one is for the Algonquin Writing Center, would be attending a trip in Utah this time and at which they've presented in the past. So we have quite a strong writing center where our students provide peer editing support for other students. That is, so that's in March, and that has my full support. It's with the Secondary School Writing Centers Association. It would not be a large group, but this was a really powerful trip last time when it wasn't in Utah last time. I think it was in Washington, D.C. As well, we have the Columbia Scholastic Press Association. It is held at Columbia University, of course, and that is the Harbinger is going to that, hoping to attend the Columbia Scholastic Press Association. We've attended that most years, and often we come back with some hardware, and this year we are for sure going to, because we have been named a Columbia Scholastic Press Association Crown finalist, so that means we will at least get a gold crown, or maybe even their highest achievement, which has a different name, but that's escaping me. So that's a very, yet another really wonderful learning experience for our journalists. And then we have a DECA field trip for the DECA conference, which is in Boston. So another one of our really strong academic extracurricular activities is our DECA program. And every year we send somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90 kids to Boston to participate, and they also come home often with arms full of trophies. So we're really excited for each of these three, and they each have my support.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to note for the record that Matt Spencer has joined us at 6:32. Are there any questions or comments on the field trips? These seem like great opportunities for students. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve DECA's overnight field trip to the DECA Massachusetts Career Development Center Development Conference in Boston, Massachusetts from February 27th to 29th, 2025, and approve the Algonquin Writing Center's overnight field trip to the annual Secondary School Writing Centers Association Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, March 18th through 23rd, 2025, and approve the Harbinger's overnight field trip to the Columbia Scholastic Press Association Annual Spring Convention held at Columbia University, New York, New York, March 19th through 21st, 2025.
So moved.
Moved by Paul.
Second.
Second by John. Any further discussion? All right, at this time we'll have a roll call vote. Kathleen Howland?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen Plechko?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I myself is a yes. The motion passes unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you. I will share that good news with the advisors and the kids.
Thank you. All right, moving on to new business, legislative update.
So no updates
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the MASC-MASS Joint Conference update.
So I believe a couple of us attended the conference. I believe Paul Desmond attended the delegation meeting,
Right.
and I attended on Thursday. And Kathleen Howland, I think, was able to attend. So, so it was again a great opportunity to meet with other school committees and superintendents across the Commonwealth. I did attend a few workshops. I think one highlight was Dr. Timothy Schreiber had a keynote speech, and it centered around dignity and the Dignity Index. It's a project that he's moving forward. And basically the idea of the Dignity Index is that everyone deserves dignity. And they've developed an index to really think about from one being the least close to dignity to 10. And it's a free tool for school districts and organizations to use to really think about how dignity can be applied in an organization. So it was very helpful. And the second workshop I attended was a school committee chair and superintendent talking about communications and how they communicate and collaborate on developing agendas, sharing issues, just overall communication strategy. So it was very helpful to hear another district and how they communicate and what works well for their school committee chair. So I took a few ideas back. For me, it was a nice event, and a few of your colleagues from Northborough attended as well as Southborough, and we also had Kathy Carmignani attend as a school committee person for the town she lives in. So it was nice to have some shared learning.
All right.
Want to hear again about the delegate conference?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Actually, I do want to bring it up again
Yeah.
because we had another school shooting this week, and I think it bears repeating. There was a resolution number 3 about the safe storage of firearms, which just talked about school districts working in conjunction with local police to create communications to parents and guardians about the safe storage of firearms to protect kids from unauthorized access. So not saying anything about, taking guns away from anybody, it's just about storing them safely, which I thought was a fantastic idea, and it doesn't take legislation to do that, so I would highly recommend that we pursue such an endeavor.
Yeah, and we can work with our local police departments to see if they have any literature or information that we could send out to our educational community. And I think the last few NSBAR updates, we did send out a communication around a gun buyback program. That was kind of a regional program which the communities of Northborough and Southborough were participating in.
If it's helpful, Greg, a good friend of mine is very involved. It was a physician in gun safety advocacy as sort of a public health, and could probably provide, I'm sure, could provide resources that we could use.
I certainly can't speak for the Northborough Police Department, but I'm pretty sure that when individuals apply for and receive a license to carry firearms, that they are specifically warned about the safe storage requirement. Any additional comments or questions? All right, well, thank you for attending. I know it takes a fair amount of time to do, and so I appreciate your attendance.
My pleasure.
All right, at this time, we're going to move on to the approval of grants and donations. And again, I would like to kind of combine these three votes into a single vote. So
Sure. So again, very thankful for the donations to Algonquin Regional High School. And Sean, do you want to speak to each?
Sure. So as you probably may have known, we had the Winter Ball last week, and in the run-up to Winter Ball, we do some of our students do approach businesses and banks to ask, or some of them are perennial providers, to help defray the cost of that. And so these are funds that we accepted or hope to accept from those. That's the first two. And then the third, you're seeing a donation on behalf of Applefest in recognition of students who volunteered during that. And $500 each goes to the Community Action Club and the National Honor Society Scholarship Club in recognition of those students' efforts.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on those particular grants? All right, not hearing any discussion. I will accept a motion to approve the donation of $500 from St. Mary's Credit Union to ARHS Student Council to help defray the cost of winter ball, with our thanks. The approval of a donation of $500 from the Algonquin Parent-Teacher Association to defray the cost of winter ball, again with our thanks. And the approval of a donation of $1,000 on behalf of Applefest in recognition of students who volunteered during Applefest. $500 each to the Community Action Club and the National Honor Society Scholarship Fund, again with many thanks.
So,
Moved by Sean,
second.
second by Kathleen Howland. Any further discussion?
Can I make a request? I think you're overdriving the microphone. Maybe the gain can go down on that, or it could be pushed a little more toward Gregory. But it could be that it would be an uncomfortable signal for people that are on Zoom.
Nope.
You should be singing, man. Like, that's a good
Thanks. My
good
apologies for
I will
blowing
not
out
be
people's eardrums.
Let's see, it's still humming behind.
What if you move that to that side?
I'll just speak like this.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, all right, yeah, it would be. I'll drop it down a little bit, sorry.
Use your bedroom voice, you know? Quiet, indoor voice.
Use my inside voice, yes. I've been told that many times when I was 5. All right, is there any further discussion? All right, then at this time we'll take a roll call vote on the motion. Kathleen Howland,
Yes.
John,
Yeah.
Chris,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Joan,
Yes.
and I myself am a yes. The motion passes again. Thank you very much. And I can hear the echo too. Oh, I'm gonna slide back a little bit. All right, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report to the committee.
So we'll start off with Principal Bevan giving the principal's report.
Okay, so I'm gonna start projecting here. So I have to give Amelia credit. We're going to start with the student report. Last time we presented, she shown me with a wonderful slide deck, and now I'm using the slide deck creation elements of Canva, and I only did that because I didn't like finishing in second place to Amelia. So she's gonna leave me in the dust here again, but let's hear it from Amelia.
Thank you. So what's going on around Algonquin? So these are what has been going on, and I'll get to like what's going on this weekend, tonight actually, but there's some exciting events. So we had our winter ball this last Friday, which was a huge success. Over 700 students attended, and it was a very well attended and received event. We've also had our winter sports tryouts, and winter sports teams have been formed and their seasons have started. So that's very exciting. Basketball games and hockey games and all those sports are starting. And then the Algonquin Writing Center is launching an initiative to try to get more students to come to the Writing Center. So we've been having monthly donut raffles where students who come, they're entered into a raffle to get a box of donuts delivered to their classroom. So that's been one way that the Writing Center has been reaching out to the community. There was also the winter concert last night on Tuesday. And then the National Social Studies Honor Society had their induction on the 5th. And tonight, the National Art Honor Society had their holiday festival, and they had ornament making up in the C2 hallway. And then on Friday, there's the student-faculty basketball game. So I wanted to do a little student council spotlight on some of the inclusivity efforts we've been making this year. So we hosted a Halloween costume contest, which is our second year doing so, and we wanted to extend those efforts into the special education community. So we hosted a smaller Halloween costume contest in the CAP classroom, where we went into their classroom with separate prizes and then allowed them to vote for the students within the classroom who dressed up. And we also did trick-or-treating visits to the TLC classrooms, where we allowed the students to either pick some candy and or a fidget toy. And for Pep Rally, which we had just before Thanksgiving, we also incorporated less physical activities, such as a Simon Says and a spelling bee. We also had an alternative activity room here in the library for students who didn't want all the sensory of it. And then we had a winter ball sensory room put on by Best Buddies, which was a big hit. And so just to continue that spotlight, we want to kind of give you a rundown of what Pep Rally looked like this year. So we started off with a human wheelbarrow race, and then from there we went to an air mattress relay race where you'd have to jump on the air mattress and kind of slide it across the floor. And then Mr. Bevan was our Simon for Simon Says. So we did students versus teacher kids, and teachers' kids could come up and compete against the students. And then the varsity football team did a cheer routine. And then there was a potato sack relay race, and then we had musical chairs, and then a spelling bee, and then upperclassmen versus underclassmen tug of war, and then teachers versus students tug of war, which went into our Titan Cup game. And then we had a paper airplane contest to finish off the games. And we did this in a competition style so that each of the grades was competing against each other. And the seniors won, obviously. But, yeah.
So I will make a note, so the spelling bee, there was a notion, like, I don't know if they'll respond to this, and that got as big a response as any of the bigger rough and tumble kind of physical games, and we had students being pulled out of the crowd by their peers because their peers thought they would win the spelling bee, and it became, not think that a spelling bee would get 1,000 kids all really enthusiastic, but it got as big a response as all the others. It was really a nice testament to the work of the student council, so it was great.
Yeah, it was a fun way to kind of include kids of all physical and intellectual abilities. And we just saw like a lot of kids from all sorts of different social groups get up there and compete. And so just for a little update on what SAC's working on. So far, we've identified 6 different opportunities in Algonquin or the general Northborough, Southborough community for students to get involved in. We're working to compile these opportunities to give students the option to involve themselves in policy work if they don't want to have to run in an election format, just because that can be very intimidating for students, and we still want the students who might not be as interested in that kind of campaign to have the opportunity to have their voices heard. So, thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have any questions. My reporting on the pep rally was exciting. I heard you did a great job with Simon Says. My daughter came home and she just said it was for everyone, and so it was really, and she, it was surprising because she was able to tell me all of these things that you just put up there, and there was no test or anything, so it was just clearly she enjoyed all of them, so it was a very great event.
Thank you, that's great to hear.
Well, thank you, Amelia. Well done.
Thank you.
So next, what we will do is I'm going to bring up Janet Brown, assistant principal, and Andy McGowan, also assistant principal, and they're going to provide 2 kind of interrelated updates. And we're going to start with an update on our assessments and our students' achievement, and then Andy's going to take it over from there and talk about class size ratios.
Good evening, everyone. Really excited to be able to share with you the results of last year's testing data, both the usefulness of it and what we've learned and our accolades. So we're going to start off with the 10th grade ELA MCAS test. And there's a few takeaways here that I think are really important and showcase a lot of great things that have been happening within the English department and our students who have been working really hard. 85% of our students are exceeding or meeting expectations in their English scores. And if you combine the partially meeting expectations and not meeting expectations, we have 15% in that bracket. I'd like to point out that the students not meeting expectation has been consistently very, very low and stable, which is really good for us. And that these scores can be looked at one of 2 different ways, and I'd like to look at them in 2 ways tonight. The first way is that we can look at our scores and feel really proud of the work that we're doing. We are well above the state, of course. The state average is 57% exceeding or meeting expectations and 43% for partially not meeting. But that is not often the standard that we measure ourselves by, what the state is doing. And so we really have exceptionally competitive scores amongst neighboring towns as well. If you look at a town like Westboro, they're at 82% exceeding or meeting, and we're at 85%. If you compared that with a town like Hopkinton, they're at 91% and we're at 85. So we're really competitive for the area. But more than that, I'd like to just take a focus a little bit onto this right-hand corner. The star that you see in that chart is the student growth percentile number for the state. And the student growth percentile is like an absolute standard of how students are growing in the different school districts. So the last time the students take the exam is in 8th grade, and we measure then where they go from 8th grade to 10th grade. So they compile that data, and any student who received a particular score in the 8th grade is compared up against students who received the exact same score as we move forward into the next one. So what this allows us to see is not just how our students are scoring on standardized testing, but it allows us to see how much they're growing in our school. So I consider this one of the most important measures in a school district, because with this particular large blue blob that you see up top, which is in the quadrant of high growth and high performance, which is exactly where we want to be for our school, shows us in the 68th percentile as a median. So what that means is 68% of our students grew more than students who scored, regardless of the district, the student's classification in that district, they scored higher. And if we compare that up against some of our surrounding districts, those student growth percentiles, and you can see in the chart up there, the state considers moderate growth 41 to 60%. In our English department, we are, this year we're at 68% growth, which is really just astounding. There's been a lot of work happening in the English department. For the last 3 years, we've been doing PLCs that have rotated through the different levels, the 9th, 10th, and the 11th grade. And now we've moved on to the AP PLC. So we hope to continue this growth. There's been a lot of focus on writing. We dismantle the scores every year to see how students are performing, and the focus of our English department this year is really analyzing the writing category, which is often one of the more difficult categories that students take. If we move from the English scores to the math scores, we see similar charts. Yeah.
Sorry, before we move on,
Of
can you
course.
just give us what the Westboro and Hopkinton had for their growth?
Yeah,
You said
sure.
similar.
Yep.
So
So the Westboro grew in English at 51% compared to our 68. Hopkinton grew at 57% compared to our 68.
appreciate it.
If we take a look at the math scores, we see some similar profiles of doing very, very well. 77% of our students exceeded or met expectations, with 24% in the partial category or the not meeting. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we look at the data trends over time. But for now, you can see here in this category that we're in the moderate growth. We're still in that upper quadrant, a little bit more to the center, where 50% of our students are sort of performing their peers who scored similarly. So this is something, having that quadrant just a little bit more over to the left is something that we take a look at. So one of the things I think is helpful to know is that in the math department, our standard is that we expect ourselves to do 20% over state data on every single question. So if the state average, is at this level, we expect ourselves 20% above it. And the math department deconstructs the test and analyzes any time when our data is close to the state data. We expect to see it 20% above. So here our growth percentile is 50%, which I was curious about. It's not quite as high as in the English department, but there's a little bit different story here. You had asked me about other towns. So comparing that student growth percentile up against Westboro was at 51%, and Hopkinton's growth scores were higher than ours, but their growth percentile was 48%. And so we are moving students' skills significantly, forward. And I think that's really important. Some of the work that's been going on in the math curriculum that we hope to bear fruit in the MCAS is that this year there's a co-taught English language learner class, which I think is just a really great way to take some of our subgroups and to support them in raising their skills. In addition to that, we're piloting a new Algebra 1 curriculum. 2019, which was pre-pandemic, was the last time that our students had the ability within the curriculum to have access to online materials. So this year, with the new Reveal math programming that we're piloting, they have access to a significantly higher number of reteaching of concepts through videos in the math curriculum, and also they have more testing opportunities to practice their skills. And so we hope to see this number shift a little bit as that work continues. You'll notice there's no student growth percentile data in the science arena, and that's because this is the only test there is. So we take a look, we have very strong science results, and I specifically in this area because it holds true for math and English. So I think it's a really nice time to point out that our special populations, like special education, low income, and English language learners, in all of the categories we've looked at, specifically here in science, are meeting expectations. And the growth percentile in English and in math are in that top right quadrant for a lot of our students. I see the most significant growth when I look at the data specifically with a lot of our ELL students who within a short period of time being here really have the ability to change their skill sets and polish them up. When we look at this over time, there's a lot of information on this slide, but I think that really the area that I honed in on when I looked at our longitudinal data across the three areas is in the grade 10 math section between 2003 and 2004. So we understand that there's fluctuation every year between exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, and there can be some variability in there as we move students up. Are not meeting expectation, you can see, which is consistent among some of our similar districts, generally remains in that 2 and 3% range, which is very, very good. The one place that that we are looking very closely at is, if you notice, in the meeting expectations in 2023, we were at 57%, and in 24 we were at 46%, and you can see a 10% jump in the partially meeting expectations. So when students move from meeting expectations into partially meeting expectations, that's an area of focus for us, and I'd just like to sort of let you know that we are working very closely on that data. At this point, I've pulled that data, worked with the math department on that data, and what we're looking for obviously is kind of a common thread that we can address. What we found this year is that there isn't a single thread that addresses that, but each individual student sort of has a different story within that. We have some students who have some mental health challenges. We have students who are transferring into our school and taking the test in the 10th grade, being in other schools in the 9th grade. We have students with normal skill deficit. And so we're going to continue to work to find, to support students. We hope that that is an anomaly. So I hope to sit in front of you next year and say, yep, that was just a blip in the system, and all of the other work that we're doing, including the individual math to support students, is really bearing fruit. If we move over from our MCAS,
May I ask
yeah,
one question?
of course.
So when you,
Yeah, you can go back.
when you're evaluating that, you describe how
No, we look at it on a name basis. Yeah. And I think that it's important that to note how we triangulate things that are kind of on a name basis and not on a name basis. So when we look at scores where we're close to the state average, we look at that as sort of like a general grouping. Our students did not perform well on a particular question that spoke to a particular part of our curriculum or our teaching, and we can shore that foundation up for the next year. And then we also dial down for individual students. And where the individual students become really important is what we do after we've identified them. So we use Title I funding to be able to support students in classes. And this year and last year, we've had Title I tutors in the math classes who are able to reteach curriculum material to students within the general education classroom, and we can identify and target those students through that individual data. So it's both an approach that takes a wide lens, but also a very narrow lens. I think it's one of the things that is most exceptional about our school. We're a large school, but I very rarely find that students individually ever get lost. So I think that's a point of pride for us.
Sean?
Yeah. Could you talk about how like these students come with data?
Yeah,
from
they
elementary?
sure do.
Can you talk about how maybe that is used to in projecting, because there's a gap of a year before they take a test, but how do you use that to adjust your curriculum or look at students?
Yep. So I'll give you a couple examples. If those don't specifically meet what you're looking for, just let me know,
Yeah.
and I'll take a different direction. So I had said that classically, the writing area in English can pose the most challenge. So one of the changes that was made in the English department is that the midterm assessments are writing-based, and they're based on MCAS-like scenarios, and they're important scenarios. They're not done that way just because it's a test. If you think about all of the writing that somebody does in the world, they're often in MCAS asked to do something like write an editorial or to compare and contrast like two decisions and to be able to formulate their own decision based on that data. So we used to have in English a lot of sort of just literary writing, but now we have a lot of literary and nonfiction writing. And so we practice that particular writing in the English midterm, and then they also, through the PLC work, had worked on common distribution of different types of writing. And I think that that's something that a place where the tests have really helped round out our students' experience in order to graduate with a higher skill set, particularly for real world writing. So that's an example of like what we do. And then examples are really like data teams. So our math department and our English department, function as a group, but they also function as a data team for any particular score. And we really do look at every single student and decide how best to work on growth, but also remediation.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
So Sean, I want to first make sure I understand the question, but I think what you're saying is like they're not a blank slate. When they come to the high school, we have historical data, not even just MCAS. And so how does that inform? So a couple of thoughts on that. It's a great question. One is just that, as you know, we've been building out the Analytic View platform.
Yeah.
And one of the things that it's doing for us, and we're still on kind of the learning curve about how to get the most out of it, is that teachers have access now to more data about individual students than they've ever had before. So if a student is on their caseload, because privileges to data access we are very careful about, they now can see that student's historical data, whether it's on MCAS or even sometimes more local things like grades and things like that. So we're still in this kind of learning process about like, okay, so what are the data protocols and things that we need to match to this increased access? Because in the past, it's been much more reliant on an administrator providing teachers with access to even MCAS data at the level that we wanted them to look at it. So that's my first thought. And the second thought I would share is just that I get the opportunity to meet in some areas, and then some of our coordinators with curriculum leaders that span, typically it's middle and high school together. Some of our curriculum areas we end up with elementary, middle, and high. And that's something we're sort of talking about in terms of more local data. So for example, in world language, I've been working with the middle school and the high school, with the high school department head and then middle school department head. And we're looking at how do we use the assessment data not just for placement into courses, which we do collaborate a lot across middle and high about how we're doing that. But also, like this year in world language, we're going to be using the Apple exam, which is what we use for seal of biliteracy in the high school. We're going to use that in the 8th grade to inform placement, but then it also gives us a set of shared data that high school teachers will have this knowledge. So it's a evolving, I would say, process that much shared with others, with beyond that.
Thank you. I know you put a lot of emphasis on that data collection last year, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that was illuminated, those processes.
Kathleen?
So with the change in the MCAS requirement, will that change the grant we were talking about that we have access to help with the?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I would say no, because of the basis of Title I funding is not reliant on an MCAS score. So I would say no.
Yeah, we have a lot of internal control about how we identify students who receive those intervention supports, and MCAS has been a helpful metric because we have it on all kids, but it is not our only metric, and so it does not need to.
So it won't impact the amount?
Well, the amount is, that funding is, I think we're talking about the Title I funding, and it's federal funding, so there's lots of things that can impact the amount. The changes in MCAS score, I mean, the MCAS in the Massachusetts is not connected to that. It is part of why we still have MCAS, because of the federal, requirement.
I think the trend continues that shows the success story of our school when we take a look at the SAT. Notable data points on the SAT data is the decline in the number of students who are taking the SAT. This is directly related to the rise of SAT optional colleges, and so students are, more and more students do not have to send SAT data to a lot of schools. That is ever evolving, so that I don't think is a stable, data point. I'm curious about whether or not that will swing in the other direction. And I think it may already have been. Seems like a really good idea, and then. So you'll notice on the chart on the right, you can see the dotted blue line and the dotted red line. College Board designates a specific level of achievement that indicates that a student is college ready. That readiness score, kind of like our general state data, for us is a little bit low. So we score well above the readiness scale in both math and in the reading and writing, but that scale is based on that a student goes into the university or college and earns a C in a sort of freshman, sophomore level class. And so we would expect to see our data significantly higher in the readiness score. At the same time, we're proud that so many of our students meet that benchmark that's been set out. I would note that pre-pandemic, to have an SAT preparatory course in-house, and we have just brought that back. So we see a little dip in the scores this year for 2024. I'll be curious to see what that looks like next year. We've had a lot of interest. It's been really well received. We have our own faculty involved working with students, and we're offering the SAT prep class in the fall, which we're in now, and then also in the springtime. This is another way for us to support students in these testing measures right here, which I think is a really good thing. I think it's been very well received. We end the scoring report. I did want to mention before we go over this that you'll notice that ACT data is not in the report this year. If you notice that, and it's because the SAT has been revised. It's online. Its length is like 2.5 hours at this point. ACT is still a much more exhaustive process, and so more students are actually choosing the SAT over the ACT. Our total number of students is 10 from the ACT this year, so it wasn't statistically significant to include. And the guidance department feels that this is really specifically tied to the actual formats of the test that students are taking. If we look at our final metric, we are doing exceptionally well in our AP program. 467 students participated in 1,018 exams. I thought it would be nice to just take a look at the myriad of courses that includes. Most of those are in-house courses. Almost all of them are in-house courses. And you can see that our overwhelming data is that our students score fives, which is the highest you can score. A score of a 3 or above is really the benchmark we want to talk about, because the 86% of our students who earn a 3 or above means that that is possible for them to apply for college credit with a 3 or above. As part of our goal designation, we have some just really important metrics. Like 68% of our students took one AP class while they were here. The state average for that is 55. 58% of our students taking AP exams earn a 3 or above, and 19% of our students take 5+ AP exams. But I think, and that sounds like a lot, but I think one of the things that's neat about that is that they take one of those exams in the 9th or the 10th grade, which means that as students are starting to build capacity for college work, like regardless of the scores that they come out with, they're starting to get glimpses of what higher level work looks like in lower grades. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't think you could take an AP course in 9th grade.
I would imagine most are in 10th grade.
Yeah, you
Not
can't
that we
take
have
that.
any in ninth.
There's only one AP course in 10th grade.
So we then have 19% of our students taking that one course, which is
Yeah, just so you know, I mean, there's only one course.
I appreciate
Amelia
that.
brings up a point. Some of these on here are, when I say self-taught, we have
Yeah.
some students usually maybe taking something in a home language, let's say, that
Yeah.
they have an incredible mastery of, like a course we might not
Japanese.
teach, like Japanese or Chinese.
Yep.
So those are in there because they are students and it's incorporated in there. The incidents of that are not very high, but potentially a 9th grade could be bad. I don't know why they would, but it could happen.
Yeah.
That may relate to a question I have, which is, first of all, it's great to see this chart. I don't think we've ever seen it before, so it's nice. But it seems like there might be a couple of outliers, whereas most of these scores, like you said, they're 3s or above.
Mhm.
If I'm reading this right, the dark pink one, which is microeconomics, I think light green, computer science, it seems like there's more 1s and 2s than 3 or above.
So in the summer when this data comes out, sorry, Jen,
No, go ahead.
we examine these and we see courses that might not perform at the same high level over time, and we are looking closely at ones that have not achieved
Yeah. Thank you.
Kathleen?
No, you were first.
I think it's hard to talk about AP classes and not marry it to the necessity of mental health initiatives.
Yes.
Um, as a college professor, I'm not the least bit interested in any skills a child had as a sophomore. You know, the growth is so much, and I even wonder if that's developmentally appropriate. And I say it's not. If you attach it to the CDC survey or the Metro West survey, and you know, just having finished posting grades last week, I'm telling you, the mental health issues at the college level are atrocious. How much, when I look at a 10th grader, I just cannot be enthusiastic. It's inauthentic for me in that broader picture. But are there any restrictions on how many AP classes a child can take a year, a semester, over the course?
Yeah, so we do, because every student is really different, we counsel students on an individual basis. And so it seems, you know, we have a very wide, you know, variety in our student body. It seems ineffective to paint sort of all of that with a broad cloth, but we are incredibly invested in working with students one-on-one in terms of how they're doing in their classes, they're managing their classes to then, like, you know, stretch themselves in appropriate ways. And some students really are capable of, you know, much more capacity in an AP than perhaps another student, and they make those choices appropriately. One of the things I think that you might be interested in, and it could be something that we could pursue as well, is that many people feel the exact same way that you do about these scores, and we of course have these concerns for our students. You can actually opt out of the AP metrics, and there are schools who do that for many of these reasons. That that association combined with mental health is not something that they believe is productive for students. And having 3 nieces and nephews in the junior year of high school to the sophomore year of college right now, I understand the pressure of that very, very well. And it could be something we could talk about as a school, whether or not we want to be a part of that.
I think a college class at a 101 level is much more assumable for the workload in an AP. And I love to ask students about their experience. You know, tell me what you remembered. And mostly what I get is, I don't know how you just steamrolled over me. You know, what was your grade? I got an A. And so, you know, in the joy of learning piece, that's what I wonder if it's at a developmentally appropriate level at the school, at a college level, and the expectations are there, you know, then where, I think it's a false god to worship. I always have. And then I think the Race to Nowhere film brought out some excellent points about APs and the need for remediation once they get to college for many. And now that was, you know, a national swath, but I can't let it go without really just wanting to know how much does this cost the students to feel like they have to do that. And I always have this with me. This is the child in Grafton who killed herself. They didn't know how much she was suffering because she was so productive and so successful. The only stress they saw her in that last weeks of her life was she was stressed for an AP exam. Otherwise, they didn't know what they didn't know. But I have to say, one is just way the hell too many. And you know, when we have these meetings where we talk mental health, it's a different meeting. And then we have this meeting on these kind of metrics, you know, and I just think that we need to braid it, to understand the initiatives, how much pressure students feel to do this, how much pressure is the community putting out there for them. Because I love the profile of a graduate. I love the notion that people would come to college with curiosity and passion to learn, instead of just like hooking up for chemotherapy IV, just like, let me have it, like, what do I have to do? Which is a big switch. So that's it.
appreciate the conflict that we consistently have to navigate between the external pressures of the college world and the
And their fault.
expectation world, and how we prepare them and how they feel, what they feel like they need in order to belong in that world and be successful in that world. It's a long and arduous conversation that I think we just wrestle with on a regular basis.
I think the fact that those that give the exams get paid to give the exams, who set the standards, that this is an industry that we need to look at it through the lens of it's good business practice to put the pressure on the children, for their children. So, and I do love to think that we are in the business of developing healthy, well-rounded people.
So, well, thank you, Janet. Next up is Mr. McGowan, who's going to do a review of our class size ratio.
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. If you could keep your cell phones off the table, I think that's what's making the click, click, click.
Didn't know we were clicking.
Well, good evening. So I'm going to go through, as Sean mentioned, the class size ratios this year. So we got a few charts that and tables that may help shed some light on things. So this is all the courses combined basically with semester 1, semester 2, and full year courses. You'll see here that most of our classes kind of fall in the 11 to 24 range in terms of how many students are in those classes specifically. I'll talk a little bit about the 25+1 in just a minute, but you'll see on the far left the 1 to 10 ratio. Student support, instructional support is at 165 students in those, so it fall in the 1 to 10 ratio, which is roughly 93% of our student support classes are under 10 students. And the reason that it's not 100% is because we have a few kind of one-off sections with like maybe 12 students, 11 students that have individualized support on a one-to-one basis in some of those classes. So there's also a couple of unique classes that fall in that as well. So that's this chart. This is just kind of a different way to look at it. You'll see the blue for world language kind of sticks out a little bit more. And this one narrows it down to kind of our 5 content areas, specific content areas: math, English, science, world language, and social studies. And the reason the blue is a little bit higher with world language is because we have a number of classes that have TAs in them, and those have to be kind of classified as their own course. And so if you were to take the TA course, which is teacher assistant, which is typically 1 student, take those out, that blue would be in line with the rest of them there. So you'll see here that this kind of highlights a little bit more that the 16 to 20 range is really where most of our classes fall. Many classes are capped at 24, and you can see here that most of our classes are under that. That 16 to 20 range is really kind of where the sweet spot is for many of our courses here at the high school. So this chart speaks a little bit more to those one-offs with the 25+ kids. The environmental humanities class, that is a new co-taught class. It's going to be running next semester. We're really excited about it. It's an English teacher and a science teacher working together to go through the environmental humanities piece. They've been working hard this semester prepping for it and throughout the summer. And so that class is at 37 students, but it's 2 teachers, 2 core content teachers who will be leading the instruction in that. And this is the first year that class will be offered. Wind ensemble, symphonic band, and string orchestra, all those have higher numbers, and that's a good thing. That's what our music department likes to see in those particular classes. The Algebra 2 honors class, that's at 25 students. That's relatively consistent with all the other classes, which are pretty much at 24, which is their cap, with some fluctuation there. And the Health and Fitness 9 class at 25, that one is also pretty consistent with all the other Health and Fitness 9 courses, which run from 22 to 24. So we don't really have too many classes under that for 9th grade, which is one of our larger classes here at the high school right now. And lastly, this chart just kind of gives you a year-by-year comparison from 2019 right up to this year, you'll see that many of the numbers across the board are pretty consistent, and part of that is the staffing decisions that we've made over the years. As you see, the top row there with the enrollments has fluctuated over the years, and so what we've done is made informed staffing decisions, whether it be not filling a teacher who's retiring, or moving a teacher to teach something else, or like a redistribution, that kind of thing. And also, the numbers have allowed for some creativity with things like that environmental humanities class to be co-taught, and some other classes to be co-taught as well. So, I think a lot of credit goes to this committee, who's in the communities who have supported us when numbers have been up and numbers have been down, and so forth. But it's for the most part pretty consistent. And you can see in this too, some of the numbers are impacted, like on the 2024, where PE is a little higher at 21. That is those TA classes, those kind of one-off classes that we kind of get factored in, and if you take those TA classes out, then that number drops to where right around average with the other ones as well. So, any questions on class enrollment?
I'm disappointed to see the numbers on the ensembles are so low, like 2.7% of the entire student body. I came from a high school of, I don't know, there were 110 for each class, so 440, but we had 60 kids, 60 to 70 children, and in the band and in the chorus was probably 50. I'm surprised that these numbers are so very low, and I wonder if it's about the scheduling. I wonder, because we've often said, back to the APs, that was bumping them out, but that certainly is not favorable for the program.
And I can add a comment. So we are seeing increased numbers at our middle school level.
Yeah.
So we did see a dip, and we were projecting a decline at the high school in terms of participation as a result. Some of that was pandemic related, and I am pleased to share that our numbers, our participation rates at Trotter and Milliken are significantly increased. We're hoping that we'll see greater numbers in the next several years.
How much of that are the new string players at Milliken?
I'd have to
Wonder how
get the
many.
data.
Probably it's not a big bump, but part of the bump. Okay.
Kathleen?
So the class sizes that are 11 to 20, is it safe to say that those, no matter which one of the core areas, are those electives, or are those also, sort of I'll just ask, are those electives?
Yeah. It's a mix. There's some electives that are, certainly some electives are smaller numbers. Some other courses are smaller numbers, some that kind of get factored in that. But there are some classes that are, like, I guess you could call your regular class, that are within that range too. And there's various reasons for that. Students making a switch or something like that. And same, just like on the other end, like a student moving in and they need a certain class, that might bump a class up a little bit. So the honest answer is that it's kind of a mix.
I have a question related to, you were talking about having a TA as a class, so I'm assuming that's primarily for accounting purposes, right? So you have a TA and that's a class of 1.
Correct.
And that is reflected in the data that we're seeing here. So those classes of 1 are included in the data that's been presented here.
There are. There's not a lot of TA classes. World language and health and fitness are kind of the two areas that are hit more than other classes. And there's various reasons for that too. This year, many of the health and fitness classes have absorbed those students, and we've created like a wellness class where a TA or a student on independent study, who would also be classified as their own class, are now enrolled in another class, like a wellness class, a general wellness class, or something to that effect.
Thank you. The only reason I bring that up is because I wouldn't want the class sizes to look artificially low.
Right.
When that data is included in the average. I think for state reporting purposes, it winds up being like that, but I think the reality on the ground is, what is the actual actual average size that we're dealing with,
Yeah.
excluding those classes of 1. But thank you very much. This data is super, super helpful. The way it's been presented is really, really helpful. So thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. And finally, I'll provide my report, and I'm really going to just share a little bit of information on one of our strategic priorities this year, which is the goal, which I've kind of recrafted more succinctly than what is in our school improvement plan, which is to develop school policies and practices to guide and govern the responsibilities of AI by students and staff. So we had a professional development with a staff on November 1st, which was primarily designed to unify teachers' understanding of AI and have a common language, which we were kind of all over the place, and now we have much greater, more unified understanding. And then on December 9th, which was 2 weeks ago, as a staff, we talked about AI scales, which I'm going to explain in a moment. So one of the challenges with AI, as you probably are aware, is that it's a incredibly powerful, almost beyond imagination kind of powerful level of language production, especially large language models like ChatGPT, can provide hugely beneficial tools to students, which can be used improperly, of course, and that's what worries educators quite a bit. Our current handbook does permit us to identify a student as using artificial intelligence for academic integrity purposes, and we can, a student can plagiarize using it. Is not allowed to use AI to plagiarize, and that's something we could deal with as a school matter. But the reality is AI is so broad-ranging that to use this policy for every time a child uses AI, like using the spell check on your computer would be AI, and we would not, of course, penalize a student for that. So basically, we have a handbook policy that allows us to do this governing, but the practices in the building are still emerging, and I'm going to talk to you about that. So all of our teachers, I asked them at the end of the summer to choose one of 3 model AI policies, and they were modeled on Harvard's Graduate School of Education provided 3 different AI classroom practice expectations policies, each of different levels of kind of rigidity. So there was really AI exclusionary policies. There were really AI-friendly there was an AI-friendly policy, and then there was kind of one right down the middle. So we asked each teacher to adopt one of those 3 and communicate that with their students. So in the very least, all of our teachers have adopted one of these 3. And then what we are very close to doing is producing a list for teachers of what AI platforms are allowed. So students using ChatGPT, for example, should not be permitted because ChatGPT is not COPPA compliant, and COPPA is the regulations that guide what teachers can use with students, and ChatGPT harvests data, and we don't want that to be happening to our kids. So we're very close to producing that list so teachers know what AI tools are permitted, which ones are not. And then there's everyday teacher practices. So that's what we're going to be what we focused on December 9th. We have those technical rules-based things that I just went over. And then what it really comes down to is when a teacher is assigning a paper, how do they communicate what level of AI is permissible, if any? And that's the kind of where the sausage is made about how AI is impacting the school environment here. And so increasingly, educators are using visual models to identify and communicate to students what their expectations are proactively. We've not yet done that, but I can just show you here some of the models that exist and are available for schools to use. A lot of them rely on a pretty understandable visual language of like the stoplight metaphor there, red, yellow, and green. The more you use AI, a teacher, they might let students know where they're allowed to use AI in an assignment and where they're not. We presented this to staff, and that one on the far right-hand side, you can't really see it, and that's the one that probably is the simplest, and what that does is it shows a pretty nearly linear progression of the complexity of thought that goes into the amount of work AI provides for students. And as a result, teachers can use something like this to say, for this next assignment, We're going to be, AI is permitted up to about the yellow level, and then they can articulate what that might look like. Maybe it's idea generation, maybe it's quotation generation, but it's not grammar and spelling checking or something like that. So what we're really aiming to do as a staff is to help teachers to communicate more proactively what elements of AI are permitted and what are not before a student tries something out accidentally or on purpose, and gets themselves into trouble that we didn't tell them about ahead of time. So students deserve that kind of clarity. We haven't had the common language to even provide that clarity, and we're getting closer. We're still in a bit of a, there's still a lot of work to be done, but from where we were at the end of the summer to where we are now, we've come quite far. I anticipate at some point teachers will be communicating with students and saying this is an assignment where the following two pieces of the assignment might have a benefits from AI and you may be using them, but please don't do anything more than that. And here are the things that if you were to do that, I'd have concerns about. So there are teachers who are already doing a little bit of that. I anticipate we're going to really need teachers to do more of that. And so that's just something we've been working on. In the short term, we're gonna provide teachers with that clearly approved apps list, and then we're gonna ask teachers to update their class expectations to make sure that they've adopted that Harvard language that we talked about. On January 29th, potentially this is a work in progress. We may be using that time with teachers because students have a half day for the wellness day. Teachers have some professional development time. We may be using that time for teachers to explore the approved apps and maybe potentially discuss ways to communicate scaling to kids going into semester 2. The long-term plan really is to have teachers have a very clear understanding that they're able to communicate with students about what elements of AI may be appropriate or not appropriate in their classes. And the real answer to that question is it depends. It depends if it's an English class versus a math class. It depends if it's an essay versus a quiz. It depends if it's very much dependent on what the teacher's needs are, or what they're asking this child to do. And we just are asking teachers to be ready to start talking about that to kids proactively and not reactively when they think a student used it for the purposes of taking a shortcut. So that's work we've been doing as a staff in the last month. I think we're probably going to pivot away from AI because we really did make a lot of progress pretty quickly on that, and now we're starting to go into the season of mid-year assessment, examination, and analysis. That's really a lot of the work we do in January and February. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Sean and Amelia. Yours was much better than
I'm going to keep trying every time. I'll catch up to her.
In your packet is the enrollment report as of November 15th. No significant changes, and we are using enrollment to project class sizes for the FY26 budget. Also in your packet are the monthly financial reports, which we give an update.
Yes, so there are two new function codes that are now showing as overexpended on this month's general fund report. The first one is the business and finance line, so I am to blame for this one. So that is $22.92 overexpended, and that is due to a salary adjustment. The second line item is in our special education teacher salary line item 2305, and that is overexpended by $7.71, and that is due to travel expenses for some of our special education staff who travel amongst the buildings within the district. In terms of the monthly general fund report, this report is reflective of the first 5 months of fiscal year 2025. It does end as of November 30th. Year to date, we have expended $9.5 million, and we have encumbrances of $17.8 million. The ending balance is $460,922, which reflects 1.65% of the just remaining this is a bit of a difference from last month. It was a decrease of about $235,000. And the one item that really impacted that amount is our school choice and charter school function code. There was nothing that was encumbered on that function code in the previous month's report. That has now been adjusted, and so we have now fully encumbered that line as what we expect it to be for the remainder of the fiscal year. Other than that, it's really smaller accounts that are adding to that decrease in the operational budget's final balance. So at this point, I would request that the school committee vote to accept the FY25 monthly general fund report as of November 30th until audited, as well as the function codes that are overexpended.
May I ask one question?
Yes?
So can you just remind me, so on the function codes that are overexpended, you're communicating to business finance over 2292, and I found it on the expense report, but there are other ones that are overexpended, and you're just showing the ones that you haven't communicated previously?
Correct. Because you've already approved those expenditures.
Gotcha.
Yes.
We agreed that that was gonna be a monthly exercise.
Excuse me?
We agreed that that was gonna be a monthly exercise.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that.
I move to.
All right, so Becky proposed a motion that Kathleen agreed to support. So Kathleen made the motion,
Second.
and it's seconded by Sean. Any further discussion? All right, this will be a roll call vote. Kathleen? That's a yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I am a yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
In terms of the revenue report, normally in November, we would have received the two towns' assessments for the December 1st assessment. However, due to the timing of the Thanksgiving holiday and also the fact that December 1st was on a Sunday, we did not receive those assessments in November. We instead received those on December 2nd, which is understandable. So those are not reflected on this report. Really overall, November was a fairly routine and quiet revenue month. We did receive our Chapter 70 and charter school state payments as we normally do. Our investment income continues to be healthy, and we also saw the final gate receipts for the fall athletic season, as well as some student parking fees. So really nothing of significance in this report.
All right, I will entertain a motion to accept the statement of revenue until audited.
So moved.
Moved by Chris,
Second.
second by John. Any discussion? All right, this will be a,
Yeah, one little question. On the athletic receipts, has there been any difference since we moved to an electronic ticketing system?
It's hard to tell because obviously last year was, with the athletic complex, we did not have as many gate receipts. It has, I think that it's been helpful for them to be able to do it and to sell it in advance. We're still working out some blips. I understand that the lines can be a little long, so it is something that we're continuing to look at, but the revenues and the gate receipts continue to be healthy. I don't know if that's contributing to it.
So we can't say whether it's any more or less.
The season pass?
Best deal in town.
I
We
think
can't say
because of,
whether it's more or
because
less
of the
than-
athletic complex project, it's hard to
Yeah.
use last year as a baseline. But if we look prior to the complex, these numbers are in line with what we would expect.
Okay.
any additional comments or questions? All right, this will be a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I am a yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, and next up is the draft capital plan.
So in your packet is the wrong capital plan. So in front of you, we did provide the updated capital plan. And again, this has been before the committee for discussion and review, and also kind of discussed at the capital planning subcommittee meeting. So this evening, we request the committee vote the capital plan forward with the FY26 budget process.
All right, so looking for any discussion or comments on the fiscal 26 to 2031 capital improvement plan.
Just refresh my memory. It's been a long day. If we're green, is all things green, or in the green, FY26 are things then we would anticipate to be funded for next year?
No. Good question. So if you look at the pending,
Because I see
column,
priority,
you'll see
deferred.
priority.
Yeah,
Priority
okay.
are the ones that, and the ones that are enrolled in FY26. Those are the priority projects for the FY26 budget.
Priority, okay. And the ones that say deferred were deferred from past projects and moved on. Okay.
All right, I will accept a motion to accept the capital plan as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Paul,
Seconded.
second by Matt. Any further discussion? All right, this will be a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes?
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The motion passes unanimously.
So also in your packet are draft warrant articles to be reviewed by the school committee. Last year, the regional school committee did discuss annually adding $400,000 of capital projects to the assessment. What you'll notice is that there are two draft warrant articles and two options for the committee to consider. The first is the $400,000, so identifying the two projects, the technology infrastructure and equipment, and the roof repair and replacement. And the second warrant article parallels that, but also adds a couple other projects. It includes the sidewalk curb repair leveling, surveillance system upgrades, and the parking lot seal coat and crack resurfacing. So the second draft warrant article aligns with the amount in the priority column for FY26. If you subtract the black box performance theater presentation system upgrade, we are going to find another source of funds in the FY25 budget to accomplish that. So it subtracts that out. And really, it's up to the committee to consider whether we move forward with a $400,000 warrant article for capital assessments for each of the communities, or the $560,000. And that was discussed at the operational budget subcommittee. And there are merits to both.
Sorry, hate to ask. Where are you getting the $75K for the sound system?
It's, first of all, it's good question. The black box presentation system projector. John Parent has quoted the projector for the black box. Actually, I want to make sure Matt's talking about the right thing.
You said that you were going to find $75,000 elsewhere.
Yes.
Because it was on the priority list and it was in green
Correct.
on the other page.
So
Where are you finding your $75,000?
So the presentation for the black box theater is estimated to cost $30,000. And we do have funding in the technology account to, in that FY25 fund, technology account to fund that presentation system.
That's John's budget?
Correct.
And this is a technology item as opposed to, okay. And that's prioritized over all the other things that John needs to fund.
Yeah, I mean, I think the black box theater has been a priority for the high school for a long time, and Principal Bevan has worked with Keith and John to really make sure that we get a system in there that actually allows us to use the space as intended.
Okay.
So my question is, are you looking for a decision on us tonight as to which one of these articles we would want us to approve, or we can move?
No, just for discussion
just
and
for
future
discussion.
decision.
Because sorry.
Well, my thought is if we need 560, we should ask for 560, because I know a lot of these items, this is not the first time they're coming up, so I mean, rather than just keep kicking it down the road. And I guess I'm especially targeting this at Southborough, which, denied us the opportunity to create a stabilization fund for this, so This is what we need, this is what we're asking for.
I mean,
We can vote tonight.
I think, my opinion is deferred maintenance just results in higher costs later on.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're looking at here.
Warrant articles need to be submitted not until March,
Typically in January.
January.
Do we happen to know what?
We don't, and it differs in each town. But we have flexibility to actually.
Oh, good. Would there be an issue, because I think our meeting in January is like January 15th, or somewhere in that range. Would any issue taking a vote on that date instead? Or because, I think there probably is, there seems to be some desire to vote on the article this evening. And so if it's the will of the committee, I'm willing to defer it or take a vote on it. But I understand if people want to sit on it till the next meeting. Just looking for some input.
May I ask one clarifying question? So, I'm not sure if it's the next agenda item, but we're gonna talk about the draft budget.
Yeah.
Some point, if we get the materials tonight, we will get to like the assessments of the town. This is, when you present the assessment, does this get included in that or not?
So in the budget presentation, the regional agreement assessment, and then we also do the capital assessment as part of the overall budget, so yes.
But in order to get it on there, we have to have the separate warrant article. It's not part of the operational budget.
Correct.
And we fully support it.
Just one general comment, the more we know in terms of the FY '26 budget, the easier it is for us to actually start getting to a real budget number for FY '26.
So that's an argument for voting tonight?
Yes. If there's no session.
I guess,
I will-
is anything gonna change between now and a month from now, materially? Or any reason to delay it, I guess is the question.
I will entertain a motion to accept and adopt the draft warrant, the second draft warrant article for $560,000 for the technology infrastructure and equipment replacement, the roof repair and replacement for the locker rooms, boiler rooms, and critical cafeteria areas, the sidewalk and curb repair leveling, the surveillance system upgrades, and the parking lot seal coat and crack resurfacing purposes.
So moved.
Moved by Paul.
Second.
Second by John. Any further discussion? All right, this will be a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
So also in your packet is the FY '26 budget priorities. So again, these were presented at the last regional school committee meeting and also discussed at the operational budget subcommittee. And again, we're asking for a vote to approve these priorities.
I will entertain a motion to approve the FY 2026 budget priorities as it appears in the packet.
So moved.
Moved by Paul.
Second.
Second by Chris. Any discussion?
Yeah, can I just say, I really like this format. I think this, it's Matt's brainchild along with Greg, and I just really like it because, I mean, it's specific priorities for this year that all align with the bullet points we see up top. I just think it's a big improvement from what we had in the past. So kudos.
I concur. Sean?
So the specific priority, are they just a reiteration of some of the ones above, like the technology infrastructure? Seems to be the same dollar amount. Is that different?
The last fund the suite of technology tools in one half the classrooms.
Yes.
That is the what you just voted on for the capital assessment.
Yes, okay.
And-
I just
and-
wanted to make
no,
sure it
yeah.
wasn't a difference.
Yeah, it is the same. That, it's, just to bring it back to the subcommittee discussion, so there's a lot of dialogue around what we are presenting in these materials. To two things that maybe I would call out, because you've just asked that question, that served as a nice reminder to me. So one, the original document that we looked at in the last meeting had a lot of reference to specific positions that the team was looking to add. And as we began to understand what those positions included, really, they were fractional positions, all meant to serve kind of a level services budget. So we felt that that was addressed by the overall budget priorities of providing a certain level of service to the community. And so they didn't need to get called out, because it's all about how we meet our plan. This particular line item, including it separately, kind of goes back to the reason why you were presented with two different warrant articles, one at 400,000 and one approaching, the priority shows 630 versus the 570 that we approved, is specifically because we brought that particular project forward, because last year when we talked about the need to do a lot of capital projects, it was, we want to have about $400,000 every year to make sure that we can do the projects that were being deferred for so long. Because we want to get that particular project done, we pulled them forward into the first 2 years. And so that's why we're calling it out as a priority on the budget priority schedule. I think, is that a fair way of describing it?
Thank you.
Any additional comment? All right, at this time, we'll have a roll call vote. And again, we're voting on accepting the 2026 budget priorities as it appears in the packet. Kathleen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. The motion passes unanimously.
And also in your packet is the budget calendar. Thank you to Cheryl for keeping us on schedule and up to date. And lastly, this evening, Becky and I will present the FY26 preliminary budget. So it's hard to believe it's December 18th, and a tremendous amount of work has been accomplished to get to this point this evening with our leadership team, our teachers, and the finance department. So just a thank you to all of the folks involved in getting to a preliminary budget. I think that it's always important to really center what the goals are. The budget is a means to achieve goals. And really what guides our work is really thinking about our mission, which is to educate, inspire, and challenge all students. And then our vision, which is the portrait of the graduate. So really thinking about what do we want students to know and be able to do when they leave Algonquin Regional High School, whether it's college, career, and then life in general. And then lastly, our work really is centered around our core values of integrity, equity, empathy, perseverance, inclusivity, and respect, but always centering on our goals that really we use the budget as a means to try to get closer to achieving those goals. As you well know, we have 5 strategic objectives, and we have an annual action plan, which takes each of the strategic objectives and really breaks it down into what actions we are taking to move the work forward. So again, a very detailed plan, and it also connects to school improvement plans. So Principal Bevan shared some of the work around the school improvement plan, and also we really look at educator evaluation and teachers' goals. So we try to build a through line between teacher goals, the school improvement plan, and the strategic plan to build coherence toward what we're trying to accomplish for students. So as you know, the budget process begins in August and leads up to the annual town meetings in both communities, Northborough and Southborough. So again, some of the milestones are working with the committees to establish priorities, working with the leadership team, high school to talk about goals we're trying to accomplish. And then the month of December, typically we present the preliminary budget to the school school committee, and that's what we were doing this evening. Approval of budget priorities, check, did that just a minute ago. And then a school committee approval of the capital plan. And again, the preliminary budget is the first glance at the budget. It's taking all the work of directors, principals, the leadership team, and coming up with an aggregate budget to see where we are in comparison of FY25. So I think it's important that we don't always talk about students when we look at our budget. So I think it's really important to talk about enrollment trends, and then some of our different subgroups. So when you look at all student enrollment, from 2020 to 2024, we've seen a 14% decline in student enrollment. This was projected. If we look at our NESDEC reports, this is not a surprise to us. We are at the floor, and if you look at the next 10 years, we are going to gradually increase enrollment to a number back to, I think it's 2014. If you look at the state's enrollment decline, it was negative 4%. So again, from 2020 to 2024, we had a 10% greater decrease in enrollment in the state. And if you look at the percent of students with disabilities from 2020 to 2024, we saw a 5% increase, and the state saw a 6% increase. So we went from 14.4% to 17.5%. Percent of multilingual learners, we increased by 37% from 2020 to 2024, where the state increased 16%. And then from economically disadvantaged or low income, in 2020 to 2024, we went from 6.7 to 13. So it was a 67% increase and a 24% increase at the state level. So again, these are important trends to monitor and think about in terms of what resources do we need to allocate to meet the needs of the students. Also, in terms of enrollment trends, we are becoming a far more diverse student body. So when we look at race and ethnicity, you can see over the 3 years that, for example, our Asian population has increased, our white population went from 72 to 68%. We are becoming much more culturally and linguistically diverse as a community, and it is representative in our student body. And also, when we think about subgroups, from high needs to students with disabilities to low income to English language learners, you can see a slight increase over a 3-year trend. I won't go into too much detail. Janet Brown did a nice job sharing some of our achievement results. I think it is interesting to look at a 3-year period, looking at the number of students who, from 2022 to 3 to 24, we're seeing an increase in performance over time. When we look at advanced placement, you look at compared to other districts across the Commonwealth, Algonquin is ranked number 21 out of all the districts in terms of the number of students who are scoring 3 or above. And there are so many metrics that speak to the success of students academically. And I also want to highlight that there are many signs of success around us every day outside of just academic achievement, whether it's on the athletic field, whether it's in fine and performing arts. Last evening they had the holiday concert, whether it's leadership opportunities through the Student Advisory Council. There are so many amazing things that students are involved in that really help us get closer to that portrait of a graduate. But I do think it's important to highlight that we're not meeting the needs of all students. That although the metrics really speak to the high level of achievement in aggregate, it's really important for us to disaggregate the data and really think about which students are not meeting this success. I think, Paul, you gave one example on the AP exam. When we look at the overall results of the AP, it's easy to say, well, look how well our students are doing, which is true. But it's also important for us to look more closely, for example, at microeconomics and identify why students aren't performing at the same level in other AP exams. I think in ELA and math, it's also important for us to look at our subgroup performance and really look at the achievement gaps that exist from students, with disabilities compared to our aggregate performance, and really think about what do we need to close the opportunity gap or achievement gap and really help students achieve at a high level. So I think it's really important to focus on, again, the mission is educating all students at a high level and making sure they're reaching their potential. And we're not there yet. There's much work to do. I won't go over all of the metrics and accolades that Algonquin Regional High School receives on an annual basis, whether it's one of the top public high schools in Greater Boston, the Boston Magazine, whether it's the News and World Report, or whether it's ranking on AP scores or SAT scores. Algonquin performs in the top 1% high schools in the Commonwealth. And one ranking that we have not really shared, which I think is something to be really proud of, and this is a national ranking, is that Algonquin was ranked 219 in STEM high schools across the country. So that is quite an accomplishment. So I won't spend too much time talking about the budget priorities, but again, the budget is a means to accomplish goals and impact what students experience in the classroom. So I agree that I think the budget priorities are organized in a way that are very actionable, but also speak to some of those longer standing, consistent year-to-year budget priorities, like maintaining class size. So I think these budget priorities are very important to us internally as we move through the process to help us make decisions. And lastly, in terms of looking at where we've been in terms of budget increases, I think it's important to look at a historical context. So looking at FY24, FY25, and then comparing that to the FY26 preliminary. I think it's important to note that the overall budgets that we presented and approved by the school committee and at town meetings have been level service budgets. They have provided the same level of services from year to year with a few incremental growth in certain areas. For example, in FY24, we added a career exploration innovation unit. That was an incremental growth. But for all intents and purposes, the FY24 budget was a level services budget. I think our level services is a high standard. But again, I think it's important that each year we're not adding significant new resources. We're just trying to continue and sustain what we're providing our kids. In FY25, it was no different. I think it was a level services budget, and we made some incremental growth in certain areas. And one example, we added assistant athletic coaches to our athletic program. And then in FY26, we'll go into more detail about where we are with the preliminary budget, what percent increase we're seeing, and then again, what we're presenting in terms of the preliminary budget is the baseline is a level services budget. I will share that the 11.91% increase, which Becky will go into more detail, does include all of the asks of principals in terms of instructional materials, supply increases, etc. And it also includes positions that were requested. So in this preliminary budget, there are about $200,000 worth of positions that are added into this preliminary budget. And at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Becky to go into some of the greater detail.
So as we began FY '26 budget, and the requests that were made, there were really 6 key drivers, that we noticed, that emerged, through that review. The first is our transportation. For example, with the general education, we have budgeted, at this point, a 33% increase. We have also noticed over the past couple of years a reduction in our federal entitlement grants, specifically the title grants and then our IDEA special education grant. This year, there was a reduction here at Algonquin, and we do not know what will be happening. There are obviously conversations happening in Washington, and we are hearing that there could be further reductions in those grants. Thirdly, it would be our insurance and our benefits. We have a health insurance advisor that we are working with, and at this point in time, they have recommended that we include a 10% increase in our operational budget. They are working with us. We continue to meet with them. They are looking at our claims data, and we are hopeful that that number will be lower, but at this point in time, they are advising a 10% increase. We also have a number of instructional resources that are included in this budget. The instructional hardware that is part of the multi-year plan that we have for bringing on devices here at Algonquin so that we can continue the one-to-one initiative, as well as new curriculum materials, specifically in the math department. Our school facilities and our building maintenance, that was one area that was also requested and was a budget driver. And then our student services, we have seen a large increase in our out-of-district placements. So just as a review for where we were last year in the fiscal year 2025 budget process, the initial requests from the administrative team as well as the directors did come in at a 12.88%. We then applied circuit breaker as we normally do, and that is circuit breaker for special education tuition and transportation. And after applying those funds, the preliminary budget that was presented to the school committee last year was a 10.31% increase over fiscal year 2024. We continue to work on that budget and on the numbers as a team, and we ultimately ended up at a 4.82% increase for FY 2025. So just as a point of context, our fiscal year 2025 appropriated budget is $27,871,426. So a 1% increase off of that would be $278,714. And so that's a number that we're really keeping in the back of our mind when we're thinking about what we are either adding or needing to reduce from the operational budget. So where do we stand at this point with FY '26? The initial requests that came in reflected a 15.2% increase. And as Greg did mention, that was this includes all of the requests as well as all of the positions that were requested. And so that budget was a $32,109,029 operational budget. We then applied our FY '25 circuit breaker special education funds. The first line, which is $887,097, is for tuitions and for other services, whereas the second line is for our transportation reimbursement, and that is $30,477. So you can see right off the bat, we did apply $917,474 against our special education out-of-district expenses as well as our transportation. So after that reduction, that brought our preliminary budget to an 11.91% increase, which is an increase of $3.3 million over fiscal year 2025. So at everyone's spot at the table, we have provided you with a line item budget for the preliminary budget so that you can see exactly where we're seeing the increases and what the function codes look like at this point. We've also gone through and highlighted those function codes that have increased by $50,000 or more over fiscal year 2025. In particular, there are 6 line items that I'd like to highlight at this time, and those are bolded and in yellow on the screen. The first is teacher salaries, and that is due to COLAs and also teachers moving up through the steps and the lanes. And so that is a 7.35% increase, but represents $724,000. The next is our transportation, and that is for our general education transportation. As I mentioned previously, we had budgeted a 33% increase, or $422,000. Next is our employment retirement program. All of the staff who are not in Mass Teachers Retirement pay into the Worcester Regional Retirement System, and annually we do receive an assessment from them for that pension plan. And so we are projecting a 15% increase on that line item, which would be $109,000. And as I mentioned, our health insurance, we're projecting a 10% increase, which is $260,000. We also see an increase in our instruction fed line, which again is cost of living increases for salaries for teachers, and that is a 7.35% increase, or $191,000. And then lastly, our non-public schools tuition, and that is a 101% increase, or $511,000. So those 6 bolded line items total $2.2 million. And when we're talking about an overall budget increase of $3.3 million, you can see that that makes up the substantial amount of that increase. So just as a reminder for where we are with our preliminary budget, it is a $31,191,455 budget. Compared to FY 2025, it is an increase of $3,320,029, or 11.91%. And again, just a reminder, we're not too far off from where we were last year at this time when we started with a 12.88, presented a preliminary of 10.31, and then ultimately ended up at a 4.82. And so the next steps, we will continue. We've already started to have conversations for budget review and revisions. We're working with the high school leadership team and with other departments to really look at the lines and to come up with some priorities. In January and February, we will continue that process and present a recommended budget to the school committee for their approval. We will meet with our member towns, the advisory committees and the select boards, as well as our capital planning committees. We'll hold the public hearing at school committee, and then ultimately we will end up with the town meetings, actually hopefully maybe in April. Southborough at the beginning on April 10th or 7th, and at the end of April in Norfolk. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Can I just add a couple points too? I think that there are 2 factors in this FY26 budget that are unique that we haven't seen for several years. The first is that we are negotiating a new contract for transportation. The contract we had negotiated 5 years ago, extremely favorable terms, and we have been a beneficiary of that contract for the past 5 years in terms of cost savings. Maybe not delivery of service, but in cost savings for the budget. This is definitely a market correction that we're seeing in terms of the FY26 budget, which has a significant impact on that increase that you see. The second impact that we're seeing is we did have a student who moved into the community who received who requires a residential placement, that is $700,000. So again, that is not typical of what we see in terms of an out-of-district student moving into our town and having a residential placement. It is the responsibility of the community to provide that level of service, but it is an impact to our overall budget. So between those two unique factors, this budget process is going to be more challenging than I think we've experienced in the past 3 to 5 years.
Kathleen?
Okay, thank you. I had a couple of questions. So for the drama teacher, after Paul D'Agostino's departure, has that person been replaced at even the level that he was, knowing that they were trying for more?
John, do you want to?
No, that position's not been pursued. We just did not have it.
And then I noticed the transportation for music, and I think that we had increased theirs because they were not able to get competitions, but it's gone back down. Are they not attending these competitions that they asked the money for?
That was actually a request by Amy Collins because she redistributed those funds elsewhere within her budget line. So it was not a reduction on our part. It was based on her needs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I think.
I just add, so I failed to mention also that Operational Budget Subcommittee has met on 2 occasions and really has been helpful in providing feedback and input on how to share the presentation, how to organize the information. So I just want to thank members of the Operational Budget Subcommittee, and we will continue to meet as we kind of move through the process.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I was thinking about making a comment to the other committee members. I was going back to the materials to see what you had presented before. And the thing, just to put it in context, the slide that shows the fiscal year 24, 25, and 26, and then the budget priorities with the arrows going down, we struggled as a subcommittee comprehending what this was really telling us, because fiscal year 24 and 25 was going up 3%, 4.8%, and now we're at close to 12%, and then we were highlighting these things as changes. You did a nice job of saying how really it's a level services budget, but these are the small incremental changes we've made. For fiscal year 26, the items that are listed here are the items that we presented in the budget priorities. Those 2 line items are, I believe, are only $100,000, and so that's less than 1% of an increase. So it's not explaining the 11.9%. And then beyond that, we asked the team to include in the budget the salaries associated with the increases that were meant to maintain a certain level of service, which again was, I think the number you said was a little bit more than 200,000, so closer to that 1%. So this slide, which I think you've now added, was very helpful in terms of really bridging, okay, here's the things that are driving the increase and the dollars associated with them, and then explain the 2.9 versus the 3.2. So like, there was a lot of work that got done from the time that
So it's
we
Monday.
met. Yeah, precisely. Monday night,
Right.
8 o'clock at night. So it really is impressive, and I think I'm glad you called our vote.
You asked all your questions.
So thank you for that.
I think it's important to note with these highlighted items, especially, is that these are fixed, essentially fixed costs that more or less lie beyond our control. Correct? Is that a good way to look at these numbers? So it's not as though we have very limited control over what we can do within these cost centers.
So I think.
Correct. And still maintain level service.
So I think with a regional budget, it's always important our best information that we have currently. As we move into the month of January and February, our numbers will become more fine-tuned. We'll get a better sense of, for example, what health insurance costs will be. And a 2% swing in either direction can have a significant impact on some of the bottom line. So, we operate as our own entity, like ATOW. So there are more variables in terms of some numbers shifting that can impact the overall budget. But these are fixed costs. These are not costs that we can't just say we're not going to. They're a responsibility.
Another question I have is, as it relates to circuit breaker and transportation. I think the cost for a lot of districts in transportation is going up. Will the state generally absorb a portion of that increase with its reimbursement? Or will they just drop their reimbursement, seeing that the cost of the transportation is going up? And the same thing with circuit breaker. We, as a district, will be able to mitigate some of that cost in the next, would it be the next fiscal year after FY26? So we'd recoup some of the
It'll take a year
cost.
for us to catch up in terms of getting reimbursed through circuit breaker. So we are potentially able to apply for extraordinary relief, but that's highly unpredictable, and that is typically something we would learn in May or June. Not very helpful in terms of this budget process. In terms of circuit breaker transportation reimbursement, that is based on every Student Succeeds Act, and that is a formula that by law has to be funded, so we could see an increase. But it's nominal. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it can help.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much for your hard work on that budget. It's going to be a difficult budget. Moving on, I think that concludes.
Yes, that concludes the superintendent's report.
There is old business. There's none at this time. Policy development and or distribution, none at this time. We'll now open up an opportunity for public comment or audience sharing. Not any from the committee. Not hearing any. Personnel.
In your packet is the personnel reports, and I just will highlight that we do have a retiree who will acknowledge at the January meeting. So Randy's last day is Friday, so a long-standing custodian who's done a wonderful job. So we will welcome him and congratulate him on his retirement.
Thank you. Communications to committee, there are none at this time. Approval of bills and payrolls, that's been done online. And agenda items for next month, FY26 revised preliminary budget, and science department presentation. If anybody has anything they would like to add, feel free to speak now or send me an email as it relates to the agenda. All right. That concludes our agenda. So, on that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Kathleen. Second by Paul. Any discussion? All right, this will be a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Kathleen? Paul?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
And I am a yes. We are adjourned at 8:31. Have a great holiday, everybody.